The holographic displays in the boardroom bled red. Julian Croft watched his life's work, Project Chimera, being corrupted in real time. For 3 months, these glitches had escalated from minor annoyances to a full-blown surgical assault that felt personal. He slammed his hand on the glass table, ignoring the gasps from his top engineers. They were useless. "It's not a rival corporation," he snapped, his voice raw. "This is targeted, precise." Only Marcus Vance, his COO and sole confidant, remained calm. He placed a steadying hand on Julian's shoulder. "We'll find them, Julian. We always do." Julian's shoulders sagged with the weight of his paranoia. He nodded, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his team, seeing only potential traitors. "You're the only one I can count on, Marcus," he murmured, the words sealing his fate more securely than any line of code.
This is TS Simple Serene Stories. Before we get back to this touching story, I have a quick question for you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that humanity and miracles are eternal, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's get back to the story.
Chapter 1. The Bleeding Edge. The holographic displays in the Croft Innovations boardroom bled red. Waterfalls of corrupted data cascaded down the glass walls, a digital hemorrhage that mirrored the bleeding of Julian Croft's life's work. Project Chimera, his revolutionary logistics AI, was under siege. He watched the crimson code flicker across the panicked faces of his top engineers, each one a potential fool or a traitor. 3 months. Julian's voice was a low growl that cut through the frantic typing. 3 months of escalating glitches. We've gone from network slowdowns to a full-blown surgical assault. This isn't a rival corporation trying to poach code. This is targeted, precise. They anticipate our every patch. He slammed his hand on the glass table, the sharp crack making his team flinch. "What are you not telling me?" A senior engineer, Chen, nervously cleared his throat. "Julian, the attack vectors are sophisticated. They're not just stealing data, they're testing the system's limits. Given Chimera's predictive modeling, if someone were to gain full control..." He hesitated, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Theoretically, they could do more than just disrupt shipping lanes. They could map and cripple global supply chains." Julian shot him a look of pure acid. "Don't be hyperbolic, Chen. This is about corporate espionage, not some doomsday scenario. Focus on finding the breach." He turned his back on them, a gesture of complete dismissal. Only Marcus Vance, his COO and mentor, dared to approach. He placed a steadying hand on Julian's shoulder, his calm a stark contrast to Julian's volatile energy. "Easy, Julian," Marcus said, his voice a soothing baritone. "You're pushing yourself to the brink. Let the team do their work. We'll find them. We always do." Julian's shoulders sagged, the anger momentarily draining away, replaced by a profound weariness. He scanned the faces of his staff again, the paranoia creeping back in like a cold fog. Who could he trust? Marcus had been with him from the start, a rock in the swirling chaos of his own ambition. "You're the only one I can count on, Marcus," Julian murmured, the words a quiet confession. Marcus's expression softened with practiced sympathy, a subtle victory glinting in his eyes that Julian was too exhausted to see. Hours later, Julian returned to his penthouse. The sprawling space, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city, felt less like a home and more like a sterile, high-tech prison. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the climate control system. His maid, Anna, was there, a quiet ghost in a simple gray uniform. She was polishing the brushed steel housing of the server room's exterior vent, her movements economical and silent. Julian barely registered her, moving past her toward the bar to pour a drink he didn't want. As he stared out at the city lights, Anna's polishing cloth paused for a fraction of a second. With a movement too swift for the eye to properly track, her thumb flicked open a nearly invisible seam in the cloth. She deftly swapped a full micro SD card from a tiny magnetic listening device hidden in the vent's grill with a fresh, empty one. The motion was fluid, practiced, and utterly concealed within the mundane act of cleaning. Later, she moved to his desk, a chaotic landscape of tablets and schematics. Picking up a discarded network diagram, she began to wipe it down with a different cloth, one with a micro-woven scanner embedded in its fabric. As she wiped away the day's dust, she was capturing a perfect, high-resolution scan of his latest firewall architecture. To Julian, lost in his own world of betrayal and stress, she was just the maid, invisible, harmless, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Machine. In the quiet pre-dawn hours, long before the city stirred, Elena sat in her small, Spartan room. A device no larger than a coin was pressed to her temple, transmitting a silent, encrypted message. Nix, report. The voice in her head was sterile, without inflection. 6 months on site, she transmitted back, her thoughts forming the words. Initial 3 months confirmed the asset. Target is Marcus Vance. Karen has him fully compromised. Their offensive began 3 months ago, post-compromise. The attacks are not random, they are methodical reconnaissance. Each glitch is a test of Chimera's defenses. They are learning the architecture. I believe they are preparing for a final data extraction. Understood. Maintain cover. Prevent extraction at all costs. The connection severed. Elena removed the device, the silence of the penthouse rushing back in. The cost of failure arrived 2 days later. An automated cargo ship, guided by a beta version of Chimera, nearly plowed into a port facility in Singapore, its collision avoidance system mysteriously failing. Only a last-second manual override prevented a catastrophe. The incident was too close to critical infrastructure to be ignored. It triggered a federal alert that echoed all the way to Julian Croft's glass tower. The FBI arrived without ceremony. Agent Thorne was a man who seemed to be made of sharp angles and crisp, dark suits. He and his team of 2 tech specialists stood in Julian's living room, their presence a stark violation of his private sanctuary. Marcus was there, his expression a perfect mask of grave concern. "Mr. Croft," Thorne began, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The incident in Singapore has been traced back to a breach originating from your company's network, specifically from this IP address." He held up a tablet displaying the penthouse's unique identifier. "The attack vector is internal. We need immediate access to your central mainframe." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. Internal. The word hung in the air, confirming his deepest fears. He looked at Marcus, who gave a slight, grim nod. There was no choice. "This way," Julian said, his voice tight. He led the procession to the server room, a sleek obsidian vault set into the wall. He placed his thumb on the biometric scanner. The light glowed red. "Access denied." He tried again. Red. "Access denied." A cold dread washed over him. "That's not possible," he whispered. He was locked out of his own system. The hacker wasn't just in the network. They were in control. He didn't see Marcus subtly palm a small device in his pocket, the trigger for the lockout he had initiated minutes before the FBI arrived, a perfect way to frame the ghost in his machine. "Let my man have a look," Thorne said, gesturing to one of his agents. The tech expert plugged a device into a bypass port, his fingers flying across a keyboard. After a moment, he shook his head. "The system is actively fighting me. It's rewriting the security protocols as I try to crack them. I've never seen anything like it." "Is there an internal camera feed for this room?" Thorne asked, his gaze sharp. Julian nodded numbly. "On my security hub." Thorne pulled out his own tablet, syncing with the building's network. A moment later, an image flickered to life. The feed was grainy, but the scene it depicted was utterly, incomprehensibly shocking. Inside the climate-controlled server room, amidst the silent, humming monoliths of data, was a lone figure. It was his maid, Anna. She wasn't breaking things or planting explosives. She was perched on a stool before the central console, her hands a blur across the holographic interface. A cascade of brilliant green code, impossibly fast and complex, flowed from her fingertips, battling the encroaching red of the malware. She wasn't destroying his system. She was fighting for it. For a moment, Julian's brain refused to process the image. The maid. The quiet, simple woman who cleaned his floors and dusted his shelves. The sheer absurdity of it shattered his composure. The paranoia, the stress, the feeling of utter helplessness. It all coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. "Anna!" he roared, the name tearing from his throat. He hammered his fists against the cold, unyielding door of the vault. "What have you done?" The betrayal was absolute. The one person he never suspected, the one person who was too simple, too harmless to be a threat, was the saboteur. Agent Thorne's face hardened. He saw a compromised system, a locked-out CEO, and an unauthorized civilian inside the most sensitive room in the building. There was only one professional response. "Breach it," he commanded, his voice cutting through Julian's rage. "Now!" Chapter 3. Verification Protocol. 7-7 Alpha. The shaped charge blew the lock mechanism with a deafening crack, and the heavy vault door swung inward. 2 FBI agents, weapons raised, stormed into the server room, their boots thudding on the raised flooring. Julian, his face a mask of fury, was right behind them, with Marcus and Agent Thorne bringing up the rear. "FBI! Hands in the air! Get on the ground now!" an agent shouted, his voice muffled by his helmet. They found Elena Petrova perched on a stool, bathed in the green glow of the central console. She didn't flinch at the explosive entry. Her eyes remained fixed on the screen, her fingers a final, fluid blur across the holographic interface. With a decisive tap, she entered one last command. On a large monitor mounted to the wall, a single line of text appeared in stark white letters. System purge complete. External threat isolated. Only then did she allow herself to exhale. She slowly raised her hands, palms open, and swiveled on the stool to face them. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. The meek, downcast gaze of Anna was gone, replaced by an expression of cold, analytical calm. Her posture, once slightly stooped, was now perfectly straight, her shoulders squared with an authority that seemed to suck the air out of the room. Julian lunged forward. "You! What did you do to my company?" Elena's eyes flickered past him as if he were a piece of furniture, landing squarely on Agent Thorne. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the soft, hesitant murmur of a maid. It was crisp, clipped, and laced with an unyielding command that made the armed agents pause. "Agent Thorne," she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. "My name is Elena Petrova, Aegis Task Force. I am taking operational command of this situation." Julian stopped dead, his angry tirade dying in his throat. He stared at her, then at Thorne, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the one standing before him. Marcus's face was a perfect study in stunned neutrality, but his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Thorne recovered first, his training kicking in. He took a step forward, his own weapon still trained on her center mass. "I don't know who you are, but you are in a federal crime scene. You will comply, or we will use force." "That would be an inefficient use of resources, Agent," Elena replied without blinking. The barrel of the gun aimed at her chest didn't seem to register. "I require verification, not compliance." She held his gaze. "Inform Director Evans that Nix has secured the package and is running verification protocol 77 Alpha. He will confirm." The name Director Evans and the technical jargon of the code phrase hit Thorne like a physical blow. It wasn't theatrical. It was procedural, the kind of phrase that unlocked doors far above his pay grade. He hesitated, his professionalism at war with the sheer impossibility of the situation. He kept his weapon trained on her, but subtly touched his earpiece. "Dispatch, I have a possible code Sierra. Need immediate verification for Director Evans. Authentication, Nix. Protocol, 77 Alpha." The silence in the server room was absolute, broken only by the hum of the cooling fans. The two FBI agents held their positions, their eyes darting between their leader and the impossibly calm woman on the stool. Julian's mouth was agape, his rage replaced by a profound, disorienting confusion. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, Thorne's eyes widened. He visibly swallowed, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face before being suppressed by years of discipline. He lowered his weapon. "Command confirmed," he said, his voice tight with shock. He turned to his stunned agents. "You heard her. Lower your weapons. Secure the perimeter. No one in or out without her authorization. We're on her authority now." The agents, looking utterly bewildered, reluctantly lowered their rifles. The power in the room had shifted completely. With the FBI now acting as her security detail, Elena finally turned her attention to Julian. "Mr. Croft, I apologize for the deception. It was a necessary component of the operation." "Operation?" Julian sputtered. "You're my maid." "That was my cover," she stated simply. "I was placed in your household 6 months ago by Aegis to investigate a hostile entity known as Karen. They were not trying to ruin your company, Mr. Croft. They were using corporate sabotage as a smokescreen to gain full control of Project Chimera." She stood up, her movements precise. "In Karen's hands, Chimera is not a logistics tool. It's a weapon capable of destabilizing global markets, infrastructure, and defense systems. My purge has locked them out, but it was a last resort. They were hours away from a full extraction, aided by a mole with C-suite level access inside your company." She let her gaze drift from Julian to Marcus and back again. "The threat is not gone. It's standing in this room." Chapter 4. The Analog Failsafe. The penthouse, once a monument to sterile minimalism, had morphed into a makeshift command center. FBI technicians had run cables across the pristine marble floors, and holographic displays now showed network traffic and security feeds instead of abstract art. Julian Croft stood amidst the controlled chaos, feeling like a ghost in his own home. The whiplash of the last hour was nauseating. His maid was a super spy. His life's work was a potential global weapon. And the traitor who had caused it all was likely his closest friend. He found Elena not at a glowing console, but in a quiet, forgotten corner of the penthouse. There, against the panoramic view of the city, stood a relic, a vintage analog server rack from the late 1990s. It was a museum piece, a sentimental keepsake from his early days, all humming fans, chunky tape drives, and a spaghetti of thick gray cables. Elena had a side panel open, a diagnostic tool in her hand, her expression one of intense focus as she calibrated a magnetic tape head. As Anna, she had often dusted the machine. Now she was communing with its soul. "What are you doing?" Julian's voice was hoarse. "Maintenance," she replied without looking up. "The system was drifting out of spec. It's a 25-year-old piece of junk. It's been out of spec for a decade. Why do you care?" Elena finally straightened up and looked at him. "Because it's reliable. It does one job, it does it well, and it can't be accessed from the outside. It's honest." She ran a hand over the cool metal housing. "This model, it was my father's design. He was an engineer, a brilliant one. He believed technology should be a shield, something to protect people." Julian watched her, seeing for the first time the deep, quiet pain that fueled her iron will. "A corporation stole one of his designs," she continued, her voice losing its clinical edge for just a moment. "They twisted it, turned it into a weapon for market manipulation. It ruined him. He lost everything. I do this work because I will not let what happened to him happen to anyone else. I chose your company, Mr. Croft, because Chimera had the potential to be the greatest shield of all, or the most devastating sword." The revelation settled heavily in the space between them. Before Julian could respond, Elena's focus snapped back to the present. "My purge was successful," she said, her tone once again all business. "I severed every connection Karen had to your network. The mole is completely locked out. They have no more remote access." A sliver of relief cut through Julian's anxiety. "So it's over?" "No, it's entered a new phase." She gestured from the new, sophisticated systems, humming around them back to the old rack. "When I initiated the purge, I triggered a failsafe I built into your system weeks ago. A complete, uncorrupted copy of Chimera's core AI was transferred to the only truly secure, air-gapped server in this building." She patted the analog machine. "It's all right here, on these tapes." Julian stared at the relic in disbelief. His entire multi-billion-dollar company, the future of global logistics, was stored on a machine that belonged in a museum. "The mole knows this," Elena continued, her eyes sharp and calculating. "They know their window for a remote hack has closed permanently. If they want Chimera, they now have to physically take it. Physical theft is their only remaining option." The trap began to form in Julian's mind, the pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. "So we make them think they can," Elena nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. "Exactly. We need to force their hand, make them reveal themselves. We will stage a transport of what we will claim is the only backup of Chimera's core code." She pointed to a small, sleek hard drive on a nearby table. "That will be our decoy. You will announce to your inner circle, to Marcus, that you are personally transporting it to a secure government facility. The mole, believing it's their last and only chance, will have no choice but to make a move." "And I have to act the part," Julian said, the bitter taste of betrayal rising in his throat. The broken CEO, turning to his last trusted friend for help. "You must be convincing," Elena warned. "The mole is desperate, and they are dangerous. The success of this operation now depends entirely on you." Chapter 5. The Last Confidant. Julian Croft had never given an acting performance in his life, but now the fate of his company depended on it. He sat slumped in a chair in his living room, the sleek decoy hard drive clutched in his hand like a holy relic. He looked broken, defeated, a man who had lost everything. Every flicker of his eyes, every tremor in his hand was a carefully rehearsed lie. Through a hidden earpiece, he could hear Elena's calm, steady breathing, a lifeline in a sea of deceit. Marcus Vance approached him, his face a mask of paternal concern. "Julian, you can't do this alone. The feds are crawling all over the place. Let me come with you. We'll get this drive to the facility safely. Just you and me. For security." It was the moment Elena had predicted. Julian looked up, meeting Marcus's gaze, and nodded weakly. "Okay, Marcus. Okay. I can't trust anyone else." The private elevator ride down from the penthouse was silent for the first 10 floors. Julian stared at the polished steel walls, his heart hammering against his ribs. Marcus watched him, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. "You really should have listened to me years ago, Julian," Marcus said, his voice losing its sympathetic warmth, replaced by a cold, condescending tone. "I told you the board was full of sharks. I told you your engineers were incompetent. But you never listened. You always had to be the boy genius, the one with all the answers." Julian turned to him, his feigned weakness evaporating, replaced by a cold, dawning horror. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about me!" Marcus's voice rose, filled with decades of simmering resentment. "I built the foundation of this company while you were still playing with code in your dorm room. I gave you the ideas, the strategies. Chimera was my concept. But you were the face. You were the wunderkind. I was just the steady, reliable old friend in the background." He pulled a small, sophisticated-looking device from his jacket pocket. "Karen pays very well for genius, and once they have Chimera, they'll have the keys to the global kingdom. And I," he said, jabbing a thumb at his own chest, "will finally get the credit I deserve." He aimed the device at the elevator's control panel and pressed a button. A small light on it blinked, but nothing happened. The elevator continued its smooth descent. He pressed it again, his smile faltering. "What? Why isn't it working?" "It's a Faraday cage," Julian said, his voice steady and clear for the first time. "Elena activated the shielding before we stepped inside. There's no signal in here, Marcus. No way to hijack anything." The color drained from Marcus's face. The elevator chimed softly, and the door slid open. They were not in the lobby. They were in a secure, concrete-walled sublevel. Agent Thorne and 2 armed FBI agents stood waiting, their expressions grim. The red recording light on a camera held by one of the agents was silently blinking. Marcus stared at the agents, then back at Julian's stony face, the full weight of the trap crashing down on him. His confession, his bitter, jealous tirade, had been perfectly captured. "Julian," he stammered, but it was too late. "Marcus Vance," Agent Thorne said, his voice echoing in the small space. "You are under arrest." Chapter 6. Epilogue. 6 months later, the boardroom at Croft Innovations was unrecognizable. The tension was gone, replaced by a low hum of focused energy. Julian Croft stood not at the head of the table, but beside a junior engineer, studying a complex schematic on a shared screen. He wasn't pacing or yelling. He was listening, asking questions, his entire posture one of engaged collaboration. You're right, Julian said, tapping the screen. Your approach is more efficient. It's cleaner. Let's run with it. The engineer beamed, a look of genuine pride on her face. Miles away, in a sterile, undisclosed location, Elena Petrova watched the meeting on a secure feed. A rare, small smile touched her lips. She was about to sign off for her next assignment when a new icon blinked in the corner of her screen. A simple, stylized N for Nix. She opened the secure chat window. You're still watching me. The message was from Julian. Someone has to, she typed back. Thank you, Elena. Not for saving the company. For this. For showing me a different way to be strong. You did the work, Julian. I just pointed you to the right server. He was quiet for a moment. The offer still stands. Chief of Ethical Technology. Name your price. Elena smiled. Some people work better from the shadows. She paused, then added, besides, who would maintain the servers? She signed off. Back in his office, Julian closed the chat window. His gaze drifted to the corner of the room, where the vintage analog server rack now stood, meticulously restored and humming quietly. It was no longer a piece of junk or a sentimental relic. It was a monument, a symbol of the quiet, persistent hope that had rebooted his life, a reminder that the most secure systems and the strongest people are often the ones built on an honest, simple foundation.
Thank you for taking a quiet moment with us. Every story is a journey, and we're so glad you joined us for this one.
We believe stories are a way to connect, even when we're apart. If you felt a connection to this tale, we invite you to subscribe and become part of our growing circle.
Our question for you today is, what's a simple moment of peace you've experienced this week?
Share it in the comments. Let's fill this space with serene moments.
Until the next story, be well.